This meeting is being recorded.
Well, good morning. Welcome to another episode in the series on the architecture of reality, where we're talking about cosmology and anthropology, what kind of place this is according to the ancient world and the medieval world, and then comparing it to our modern conceptions, and the and anthropology, which is the study of mankind. What kind of creature are we? And I want to talk some about the sun, the moon, and the stars for a little bit, uh, and I want to do it in order to explain the concept of jurisdiction. But there's some information that is necessary to get to the concept of jurisdiction in the ancient and medieval world, because we have truncated jurisdiction down to the self almost exclusively, and then every authority above and beyond that is actually established by power, established by strength, not by right. It's so, um, but when we talk about the sun, the moon, and the stars, we actually uh, think so differently that I think it'll be helpful to walk through the some of the concepts behind the establishment of the sun, the moon, and the stars, or the creation of the sun, the moon, and the stars. So in the Bible, when the sun, the moon, and the stars are created on the fourth day, and when we look up and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, and see space, um, the Bible describes it as they're as created to be a number of things. It's created to be lights. They're created to be clocks. They're created to rule and give us a calendar, and they're created as a series of authorities. As they are poetically developed throughout the Bible as authorities, described as authorities, um, signs of and symbols of rulers, but they're also described as rulers, as um, established rulers with a particular authority. They're established to rule the day and the night. So to start off, just as lights, when we look at the sun, the moon, and the stars, we look up and think in terms of giant nuclear furnaces, giant balls of flaming gas, giant nuclear furnaces. Um, and in our imagination, the sun is only a medium-sized ball of burning gas, but it's the closest to us, so it seems largest, but it's not the largest. The light is a byproduct of its chemical makeup. It's primarily a giant hydrogen bomb, secondarily a light. The moon, on the other hand, is not a light at all, merely a reflective sphere, a dim mirror of the sun's light. But when the Bible presents it to us, um, it actually talks about it in a different way. Right? The fact that the sun, the moon, the stars give light to the earth is not an arbitrary byproduct. It's actually one of the essential things about the sun, the moon, and the stars. They were created to give light for the earth. Right? So the fact that the moon doesn't give its own light doesn't mean it's not for light. Right? God set it up to mirror light onto the earth on purpose, and it because there was already light on the earth. There was evening, there was morning, but then God delegates the responsibility over to the sun, the moon, and the stars. So the cycles of light and uh, darkness were uh, there before, but then the responsibility to continue giving the light is handed to the sun and the moon and the stars when they are created. Um, so the the Earth is the central point, not necessarily physically the central point. That's not what it means, but the point, creatively speaking, it's why the universe is created, and the sun and the moon are created to give light. Um, there and throughout the light, throughout the Bible, it talks about how beautiful the sun, the moon, and the stars are, but also how useful they are. You know, when we you can see how these things end up being separated out in the history of architecture, right? In part of the modernist movement in architecture was, why do these buildings have to be so beautiful? They should just be useful, right? Where beauty and usefulness are are seen as a choice you make. Is this going to be beautiful or is it going to be useful? Beauty itself has no use for the modern man. It's beauty is a thing that you sometimes get, even though it's unnecessary or unuseful. But the beauty is actually a part of the usefulness, because in scripturally speaking and in the ancient world, Plato makes uh, this exact same point, is that the beauty of the sun uh, makes it useful for lifting our eyes beyond um, the simple, earthly way of thinking, into something greater. And this is uh, uh, Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, or Psalm 8, when I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have ordained. What is man that you are mindful of him? Right. So the beauty, the glory of the sun, the moon, and the stars lifts our eyes, or that's part of the usefulness. But it also teaches us about ourselves. It teaches us about what kind of creature we are, that God would establish the sun and the moon to give light to us. That so it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor of God, but it's also becomes a metaphor of us. And we still do this in our love songs. We talk about the sun and the moon as a man and a woman. Uh, we talk about the uh, the way that the stars um, cause a certain effect within us, and then we compare it to people. And Paul actually says that the differences between the sun, the moon, and the stars um, is is part of what is trying to lift our eyes, right? In 1 Corinthians 15, when he's talking about the resurrection, he talks about uh, there's the celestial glory, and there's one glory for the sun, another glory for the moon, another glory for the stars. The different stars differ in glory, right? And that he's saying it helps us to understand our own coming resurrection, right? So the uh, the the beauty and the light um, are symbolic. Well, symbolic is probably not the right way to put it. They're allegorical, maybe. It's speaking of something beyond itself, speaking both of God and then us as made in the image of God. Um, and the lights are made specifically to fit the needs of the earth. Um, One of the really one of the things that you hear a lot now is objections that start with well, put it this way: the fine-tuned nature of the universe has become a, a a difficult thing for a lot of atheists to answer, and so they tend to come at it from the other direction, either by saying, well, it doesn't even make any sense that there was light before the sun, the moon, and the stars in the Bible. That where did it come from? That light comes from the sun, and here we are, with a world full of light without the sun. And you've got this miraculous creation going on, and so for Christians, we say, well, that's it's the order of a miraculous creation. Why would it surprise us that it's something that we don't understand? We don't understand how healing would happen. We don't understand how the Red Sea was parted, right? There's miracles are beyond our understanding. That doesn't bother Christians. But the reason that objection sticks is because the the mythology of Darwinism or evolutionary thinking, the mythology, uh, it it works sort of the way you know things end up the way they are because for the same reason that a puddle ends up the shape it is, right? Because you've got this hole in the ground actually creates the shape of the puddle. So the fact that the sun was the particular distance from the earth that it is, and makes it, for example, possible to have liquid water. If the sun was closer, all the water would be steam. If the sun was farther away, all of the water would be frozen. But we're at just the right distance to have liquid water be the norm, and liquid water is central to life, and liquid water was necessary to life, and actually the life comes out of the life forms itself in the evolutionary mindset, forms itself to fit a place with liquid water, right? Whereas life would have formed itself to fit a place with steam if it was at that distance. But the shape of the puddle comes from the force of the whole, the shape of the whole, and so we fit because we were created by this place, right? And that's so deeply embedded that when you see a miraculous creation, it actually doesn't make sense within the categories. Light without the sun, how could you have that? Our only experience of light is from the sun. That sort of it's a deeper assumption that makes that a difficult thing to understand, because it's actually not a hard concept to say, well, God created light and then he gave the sun the responsibility, or he made the sun in order to continue giving light, right? That's not a hard that's not in and of itself a hard concept when you believe there can be miracles. You're not always looking for a naturalistic explanation. So tomorrow we will talk about the sun, the moon, and the stars as clocks and calendars. But and then once we've got some of that information together, we'll start talking about the jurisdictions of the sun, the moon, and the stars.